May 29th, 1453. Constantinople, 1:30 a.m. The walls have held for 1,000 years. Every army that ever looked at this city turned back. The Avars, the Arabs, the Bulgars, the Vikings, the Crusaders. Every empire that rose and fell across 1,000 years of history looked at these walls and decided the price was too high. The Theodosian Walls, triple-layered, 60 feet high, 4 miles long, had never been breached. Not once, not in 10 centuries of sieges. Tonight, that changes. On the other side of those walls, 80,000 Ottoman soldiers are waiting in darkness for a signal that has not come yet. Their Sultan is 21 years old. He has been planning this moment since he was a child. He has dragged 70 cannons overland through mountains that military engineers said were impassable. He has had his fleet physically carried over a hill on greased logs to bypass the chain that blocked the harbor. An engineering feat so audacious that the Byzantine defenders refused to believe it was happening until Ottoman warships were already sailing in their harbor. Inside the walls, 7,000 defenders. 7,000 men defending 4 miles of wall against 80,000. The last Byzantine emperor, Constantine XI Palaiologos, walks the walls tonight. He knows the numbers. He knows what is coming with the dawn. He has sent his last message to the west asking for help. No help came. He has offered to surrender the city in exchange for safe passage. Mehmed refused. Constantine XI removes his imperial regalia, his purple robes, his crown. He puts on the armor of a common soldier. He tells his commanders, "I will die here, with my city, with my people. By sunrise, he will be dead, and 1,000 years of civilization will be over." This is the fall of Constantinople, where the last empire of Rome died in a single morning, where a 21-year-old sultan accomplished what every conqueror for 1,000 years had failed to do, and where the death of one city changed the direction of the entire world. By the end of this video, you will understand exactly how it happened, and why what died inside those walls on May 29th, 1453 still shapes the world you live in today. If this kind of forgotten history is what you're here for, subscribe. There's a lot more where this came from. To understand what fell in 1453, you need to understand what Constantinople actually was, not just a city, the city. Founded by Emperor Constantine I in 330 AD on a triangular peninsula where Europe meets Asia. The most strategically positioned piece of land on Earth. Every trade route between East and West passed through or around it. Silk from China, spices from India, gold from Africa. For 1,000 years, whoever controlled Constantinople controlled the economic spine of the known world. But Constantinople was more than trade. It was the living continuation of the Roman Empire. When Rome fell in 476 AD, Constantinople kept going. The Eastern Roman Empire, what historians call the Byzantine Empire, preserved Roman law, Greek philosophy, Christian theology, and the accumulated knowledge of the ancient world for another 1,000 years, while Western Europe descended into centuries of chaos. The libraries of Constantinople held texts that existed nowhere else on Earth. The scholars of Constantinople kept alive the works of Aristotle, Plato, Euclid, Archimedes, the intellectual foundation of Western civilization. By 1453, this empire had been dying for 2 centuries. The Black Death, the Crusader sack of 1204, a civilization that once stretched across the Mediterranean shrunk to little more than the city itself. The population inside the walls had fallen from 400,000 at its peak to perhaps 50,000. An empire reduced to a city reduced to 7,000 defenders. And outside those walls, a sultan who had been waiting his entire life. Mehmed II became Sultan of the Ottoman Empire at age 19. Here is what you need to understand about Mehmed. He was not simply a conqueror, He was a scholar. He spoke 6 languages. He read Greek and Latin. He had studied every failed siege of Constantinople going back centuries and identified exactly why each one failed. He would make none of those mistakes. His first move was to commission the largest cannon ever built. A Hungarian engineer named Urban had first offered his services to Constantinople. Constantine XI couldn't afford to pay him. Urban went to Mehmed instead. Mehmed paid him 4 times what he asked and gave him everything he needed. The cannon Urban built was 27 feet long. It fired stone balls weighing 1,200 pounds. It took 60 oxen and 400 men to move it. It could only fire 7 times per day. Each firing required hours of cooling. But when it fired, the impact was felt miles away. The sound described by witnesses as thunder that did not stop. Mehmed brought 70 cannons to Constantinople. Urban's Great Bombard was his centerpiece. But here is the detail that reveals the kind of mind Mehmed had. He knew the cannons alone couldn't take the city. The Bosphorus chain, a massive iron chain stretched across the harbor entrance, prevented Ottoman ships from entering the Golden Horn and attacking the sea walls. Without naval pressure on the sea walls, Constantinople's defenders could concentrate everything on the land walls. Mehmed's solution was insane. He had his fleet, 70 ships, lifted out of the Bosphorus on greased wooden rollers and physically transported overland across a hill, dropping them into the Golden Horn behind the chain in one night. 70 warships moved over a mountain and launched into a harbor the enemy thought was impenetrable. When Byzantine defenders saw Ottoman sails in the Golden Horn at dawn, they thought they were dreaming. They were not dreaming. The trap was complete. Constantinople was surrounded on every side. The siege had been running 53 days when Mehmed made his final decision. His cannons had been pounding the Theodosian Walls since April 6th. The Great Wall, unbreached for 1,000 years, was cracking. The outer wall had collapsed in sections. The defenders worked through the night after every bombardment, filling the gaps with rubble and wooden barriers. Every morning the cannons destroyed what they had built overnight. Every night they built it back. 53 days of this. The defenders were exhausted beyond the limit of human endurance. Many had not slept more than a few hours in weeks, outnumbered more than 10 to 1. No relief fleet on the horizon, no Western army marching to save them. Constantine XI knew what was coming. On the night of May 28th, he walked to the Hagia Sophia, the great cathedral that had stood at the heart of Constantinople for 900 years. He attended what would be the last Christian service ever held inside its walls. Orthodox and Catholic Christians together, men who had been in bitter theological dispute for centuries, standing side by side in the candlelight because whatever divided them mattered less than what was about to be lost. After the service, Constantine walked the walls one final time. He stopped his commanders. He embraced them. He said, "Whoever wishes to escape, let him save himself. I will stay." None of them left. May 29th, 1453, 1:30 a.m. Mehmed gives the order. The Ottoman assault begins in darkness. First wave, irregular troops. Poorly equipped, minimally trained, sent first not to breach the walls, but to exhaust the defenders. They hit the damaged sections with ladders and ropes. The Byzantine defenders throw them back, twice. The irregulars take horrific casualties. Mehmed orders them forward again. This is deliberate. He is spending these men to tire the defenders before his best troops go in. Second wave, Anatolian regulars. They find a section where Urban's cannon has created a manageable breach. They pour toward it. The fighting is savage. Men climbing over rubble with swords. Byzantine defenders stabbing down from the edges. Bodies piling in the gap. The breach filling with dead before the living can push through. The defenders hold, then the third wave, the Janissaries. Mehmed's elite, the finest infantry in the world in 1453. Professional soldiers raised from childhood, trained for nothing but war, absolutely loyal, absolutely disciplined. 12,000 of them, fresh, rested, advancing in perfect formation toward walls as the first light of dawn breaks in the east. They find the breach, and they find something else. A small gate, the Porta, had been left unlatched in the confusion of the night's fighting. A minor gate, a handful of janissaries slip through it. They are inside the walls. The cry goes up from the Byzantine defenders. The Turks are inside. And that cry, spreading along the walls in the gray dawn light, does what 53 days of bombardment and 3 waves of assault could not. It breaks the defense. Not because the walls are lost, but because the men defending them have been awake for 53 days and fought through the night, and the moment they hear those words, something in the human spirit reaches its absolute limit and gives way. The defense collapses along the walls within minutes. Constantine XI is last seen on horseback at the breach, charging into the flood of janissaries pouring through the gap. Sword drawn, no imperial robes, just a man in soldier's armor riding toward his death at the walls of his city. His body was never conclusively identified. The Ottomans found a man in soldier's boots wearing imperial eagles on his greaves. They identified him by those eagles. They buried him with the honors due an emperor. By mid-morning, Constantinople had fallen. Mehmed II entered the city on horseback at noon. He rode directly to the Hagia Sophia. He dismounted at the entrance. He picked up a handful of earth and poured it over his head, a gesture of humility before God. Then he walked inside. He ordered it converted to a mosque. The Eastern Roman Empire, the direct continuation of Rome itself, was over. The death toll in the days after was staggering. Thousands of civilians killed, tens of thousands enslaved, the libraries looted. But the scholars who survived fled west, carrying manuscripts with them. Those scholars and those manuscripts helped ignite the Italian Renaissance, the fall of one civilization seeding the birth of another. Mehmed called himself Kaiser-i Rum after the conquest, Caesar of Rome. He was 21 years old. Here is what the fall of Constantinople actually changed. Ottoman control of Constantinople shut down the overland trade routes between Europe and Asia. The Silk Road, the economic artery of the medieval world, was now behind Ottoman walls. European merchants desperate to reach Asian markets began funding expeditions to find sea routes around Africa, around the world. 39 years after Constantinople fell, Christopher Columbus sailed west. The fall of one city redirected an entire civilization toward the sea, toward the Americas, toward the age of exploration that built the modern world. Constantine XI rode into a breach in his city walls and disappeared into history. The world that came after him, the world you live in right now, was shaped by the morning he did not survive. 1,000 years ended in a single dawn, and everything that followed began in its shadow.